Hey friends, this week's episode features a recruiter who focuses on university recruiting and diversity programs. Most people think university recruiting is only for people in their early 20s in a traditional undergraduate setting, but it's not. University recruiting for internships and full-time positions apply to graduate programs and anyone currently in school, regardless of age. My guest works for the cybersecurity tech company Cloudflare. Ellie Jamison is an experienced recruiter who provides specific tips and information for internships and early career full-time opportunities, but all her advice is applicable across experience levels. There are multiple takeaways from this episode, but the most memorable for me was our discussion around knowing your preferences and skills before applying to a position. As a career coach, I love when I hear this advice from others in hiring positions because less is more when it comes to submitting applications. The more targeted and specific you are, the easier it is to tailor materials and end up in a position you actually want. As always, if you want to connect with me or need inspirational and educational career management and advancement content, you can follow Ride the Tide Collective on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. And if you didn't know, I also have the video version of this interview on my YouTube channel, which you can also subscribe to. Just search Ride the Tide Collective. I appreciate your support. Welcome, everyone. My guest today works for a company called Cloudflare, which I actually use for one of my websites. So it's kind of cool to have somebody from a company that I'm familiar with. It is a tech company, and she does recruiting on the university side, so internships and then new grads. I'm so happy to have Ellie Jamison with me today. Ellie, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here and shed some light on recruiting for students and just any of the advice that I can, share and hopefully help a lot of people.
Yes, I am so excited. We're gonna jump right into it
Cool.
because I want to get as much as I can out of you for the time that we have. So, can you tell us a little bit about your experience? I shared a little bit of being in university recruiting, but what is kind of your experience within recruiting? Tell us a little bit more about your organization, maybe the types of roles that they normally look for, and kind of what
Yeah.
you recruit for on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I work for a great company. It's called Cloudflare. We focus on web performance and security. So we work with a lot of different partners to keep their websites secure from malware or, cybersecurity attackers. And it's just become this really big industry. As you see, like the future of crime, it's happening online, especially with holding different websites hostage. You'll see these cases in the news, every so often, and it's becoming bigger and bigger. So I work for Cloudflare. And I have the great pleasure of working on the recruiting side, which is just so great because I've gotten to meet just an array of different personalities and the type of people that we hire, the type of people that we recruit for. As you can imagine, with a cybersecurity company, we focus mostly on technical candidates. So that would be our engineers, our product managers, our systems engineers, mostly on that side. But I also get to recruit for the non-technical side, which is great because I have a non-technical background, and so it's a little bit easier for me to communicate with those types of candidates. My recruitment career started about 4 years ago, and that's kind of when I moved to San Francisco. I'm from the East Coast. Moved to SF and just kind of fell in love with how fast-paced tech was. And so I entered tech through the recruiting route. And I've been working at Cloudflare for about, 4 years since I moved. And I started as a coordinator. So I had a lot of experience just working in scheduling interviews, working with our executives, making sure that all of their interviews were correct and just a good experience for them as well as senior candidates. And then I moved into the role that I'm currently in, where I run our entire university programs. So I run our intern program and hire for our intern program, as well as a lot of our diversity recruiting, which is such a big, important issue right now. So I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Oh my gosh, amazing. I actually did not know about the DEI recruiting as well. So
Yeah,
that's great. That's definitely something we're going to have to talk about throughout this
definitely.
interview. And for those listening, I think one thing that's really important to remember, I used to work in higher education. So I worked with recruiters like Ellie all the time. And a lot of the bigger companies, especially, have somebody that's dedicated to university recruiting. So, doing internships, doing early grad, new grad, all of that. And so, it's really great to get to know those people if you are currently in college or
Right.
doing some type of program because they have so many different opportunities. So, I'm really excited for you to share kind of your experience with us today.
Yes, absolutely. If I could go back to college, my biggest piece of advice would be to have a relationship with those company recruiters. If you find a company that you're especially interested in, just reach out, and one of those recruiters is usually the person of contact. So just kind of form a relationship with them.
Yes, such a good tip for our college students. Okay, so let's talk about the Great Resignation, which we have seen
Um,
really impact more of like the full-time sector. And I'm really curious to know, has it impacted the university side at all, or is this something that's not impacting university recruiting?
I haven't seen it impact university recruitment as much as full time. I would say the market is incredibly competitive for students and for full-time employees that are seasoned. I will say though, I think that internships in, strong market, they've always been competitive. So if you look back before 2020, I'd say it's a more normal year in that sense. 2020 was definitely an like anti-intern market, anti-student market, unfortunately to say so. I think it was incredibly hard to land an internship in 2020. So I would say that the Great Resignation doesn't have as much impact on students.
Okay, that's so good to hear for students
Yes, yes.
because as you said, 2020 was really rough. I saw a lot of students lose internships and it was just, oh, it was so rough.
Oh my
So it's
gosh.
it's good to know that it's coming back and it came back this year and we're starting to see that recruiting happening again and that the Great Resignation isn't impacting them because a lot of
Right,
times one thing happens and it's like a trickle down
right.
effect, but it's nice to hear that it's not going to impact them. So,
Right. I think it's even, I definitely think it's a pro intern market right now because companies are trying so hard to fill full-time roles. And so I think they're even opening up more internships in the hope that they can lock in students early for those full-time roles later on.
oh, so good. Such a good strategy for companies
Yeah.
to do that, and really great for students that have a good experience and want to continue
Right.
on with the company. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about the hiring cycle because I know for full-time, positions, it can vary. There's not necessarily a season. It's more
Right.
whenever a position opens up.
Right.
But in university recruiting, there tends to be cycles a little bit more than a different type of recruiting cycle. So, can you explain what that is? Like, when do you start looking for students, and is the
Yeah.
intern process different from the full time, early grad process?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is different. And so you're completely right. For internships, there is a recruitment cycle. And I'd say there are two main cycles per year. The first one is early fall. So you've got October, November, kind of wrapping up in December with internships promised for the following summer. And so that's really locking in your internship early. And I think that we see that the most in finance and consulting. And then your more tech marketing, Other industries, I would say their big intern recruitment cycle is early spring. So you've got February, March, and like it dips into a little bit of April, but you're getting pretty close to summer that most people like to have their student hires done by April. So those are the two big cycles. And then for new grads, it's similar in the sense that for finance and consulting, you'll lock in your full-time new grad role early in the fall. But kind of for other industries, it can be as quick as like they don't want you to start interviewing until you can start in the next 2 weeks. And so it can be very much like a full-time seasoned employee where it's like you don't interview until you are ready to work.
Wow. Wow. Such a variance between industries. And I'm so glad that you mentioned finance and consulting. I used to work with an MBA program, and that
Right.
is exactly how it was. I had students over the summer, in some cases, starting to apply to positions, and they were like, we're just a year into the MBA. How are we
Right.
applying for this
Right.
already? I'm like, this is just how it works. This is the
Right.
cycle, and you have to be knowledgeable about it. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because you have students that come in and they are like eager, but if they're in marketing, in some of these other areas, it's like, okay, like do your research,
Right.
but then wait to apply because you can't start until after you
Right. Oh, it
graduate.
was the biggest frustration for me because I didn't want to go into finance or consulting, but I wanted my job locked in early. And I didn't get my job locked in until April before I was
Oh.
to graduate, which is so normal. But I was like, anxious and antsy and wanting it ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I remember. I remember those times when seniors came in April and it was like, I don't have a job yet. And I'm like, it's okay.
It's
Like you're gonna
okay, I
be
promise.
okay.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I remember it well.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's talk about the process of applying. And
Yeah.
one of the words that gets tossed around a lot is ATS, application tracking system. Is that something that your organization uses, and what does it look for? Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about your experience there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the ATS that Cloudflare uses, and I would say a lot of major companies use, it's called Greenhouse. I'm sure you're familiar. It's one of the biggest
Yes.
ATSs that's, available. So it makes sense. And what I would say is I describe Greenhouse, it's just like a giant Excel file, like if I can, like it's just a giant Excel file of tracking your jobs and your candidates. And from the back end, what we really see is we see what you submit through the application. We see the resume, the name, your biographical information, how to reach you. And that's kind of what we go off of when candidates apply. Unless we have specific prompts attached to a job application, usually it's just your resume. So I would say I think focusing on a resume and a good resume, which I'm sure we can talk about later, is so
That's going to be our
important.
next question.
Yeah, it's so important. So definitely a good thing to touch on.
So, if somebody is submitting to your system, we talk about tailoring. We'll talk about resumes in just a second, but
Yeah.
is your system searching for keywords in relation to the job description, or are they just submitting for a specific job and then you guys are sorting through that manually?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for the most part, they're submitting for the specific job. And we also encourage people, if their background matches multiple jobs, to apply to multiple jobs. We don't see that as a negative. I mean, there's a limit to everything, so don't apply to 10 of our jobs. I think that doesn't look the best. But
Right.
applying to 2 or 3 of our jobs shows a strong interest in us. And it can help improve your chances of getting chosen for an interview. So I think you'll probably ask about tailoring your resume to the actual job profile when you do that. I do think that that's a good thing. I think taking time to be introspective about your resume and how, if you're putting yourself on our side of things, how a hiring manager can look at your resume and say, wow, this fits with the job profile. This fits with what this person needs to come in knowing in order to get the job done well. So I think that I always encourage people to take the extra 30 minutes to add in a line that makes a lot of sense for this specific job role.
Nice. Okay, let's go into resumes because I feel
Yeah.
like that's really that's really the connection on the ATS side and for the hiring manager. But I do want to say I love that you guys don't discourage applying for multiple positions because that happens so often. I have so many clients that say, especially if a company is going through a hiring boom, like
Yeah.
if they're hiring for a lot of different types of positions and they look at a couple different ones and they're like, I'm kind of qualified and
Right.
want to look at two or three of these, but I'm not quite
Right.
sure, which one's going to
Right.
be best. And they always ask, like, should I apply to all of them? And I'm like, you know what? If it makes sense for your experience and they can see it, then why not? But
Right.
don't apply for something in marketing if you're like an software engineer,
Right.
like
Exactly.
that's not necessarily going to make sense if you're applying across platforms like that. But
Right. Right.
so let's talk about resumes. What are like your top 3 resume tips for applicants? What do you want to see on the resume?
Right. I think, oh gosh, my top tip, less is more. I think people feel that they need to shove everything they've ever done on a one page paper. And I actually really don't think that that's the best way to do it. I think picking truly, and it's difficult, and I think the best way to do it is taking some time before just diving in and editing a resume to just think about, okay, the last 2 years that I've been in this role, what is the most important thing I've accomplished? And can I quantify it? And that is like, if you can come up with, okay, I cut costs and improve revenue for this project, you can put that in a one line, and that looks so impressive. And that's really easy for recruiters and hiring managers to comprehend, rather than putting, 5 things that you did in 2 years. And doing that for, if you have a 10-year career, that's a ton of space. So that is my number one tip. And then second tip is just make sure it looks nice. I mean, it's crazy how just a well formatted, good looking resume can take you so much further than you think. Aesthetics really do matter. So just make it clean, make sure there's white space. You don't want to look at it and it's just all black font everywhere.
Right.
Leave some white space. And then 3, I think don't be afraid to put your personality in a resume. I actually have felt like hiring managers are drawn to seeing like kind of a little spunk. I don't know if you want to put your interests or hobbies at the bottom and put something fun and something that maybe just makes you jump out. I don't think you should be afraid. Even for engineers, highly technical people, I think that goes a long way.
Okay, so I had another interview where they said not to do that.
Oh my gosh, I'm giving all
And
like countercultural advice.
no, so here's what I love, and I think this is what's going to be really great about this season of interviewing multiple recruiters in a lot of different industries all over the place.
Right.
Every recruiter has a preference. Every hiring manager has a preference. Every organization has certain things that they're looking for their
Right.
culture. So for those who are listening to this and they want to apply to Cloudflare,
Yes.
then this is good information to have, right? That sometimes having that little line of here are some of my hobbies, and for some people, some of their hobbies come out in volunteer experiences
Yeah.
and other things that they do. And don't be
Yeah.
afraid of that, because there's always
Totally.
skill to learn in some of those things. You just listening to things like this, following recruiters on LinkedIn so that you kind of
Yeah.
see what their tips are. That's what helps you tailor to what that company is really looking for. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I think a good kind of catch-all is I'm giving my perspective from the tech industry. So the legal industry, finance, consulting, they're going to be very different. I probably wouldn't recommend putting hobbies or interest in if you're applying for a legal role somewhere.
So I have a question specifically for college students because I know students used to ask me this all the time, and I'd love to hear it from a recruiter perspective. What if you're a student applying for an internship and you don't have a lot of experience and you
Yeah.
feel like you can't add a lot to your resume? What are some experiences that you might be looking for those types of roles where you don't really expect them to have a job or like a corporate
Right.
job or anything like that?
Right. I mean, that's a great question because we're not expecting students to have 5 years experience. It's like, I think there's a ridiculous meme out there that's like wanted 15 years of a social media experience. It's like social media hasn't existed for 15 years. So we're
Right.
not looking, we're not ridiculous. We understand that students have very limited experiences. I think the best advice I can give is exemplify your work and side projects and side passions. So get involved in school, come up with a project, volunteer, own a project for a volunteer organization. Like that's what we look at. Or, take a boot camp over the summer. Anything like that goes such a long way for students because that's where we really see like, okay, this person isn't just throwing their resume out hoping for an internship or an interview. This person is actually interested in cybersecurity or in engineering or whatever it is, or writing if they have multiple blogs posted and whatnot.
That's so good. Okay, college students, I hope you're hearing that. You know, you can bring in a lot more variety when you're in
Yeah.
college in terms of the types of positions that you hold and things that you've done throughout your career. One of the other things that I think actually goes along with the hobby piece that I've told students before, if you have had some really unique achievement. So
Yeah.
I had a student who was a national gymnast, and they didn't actually go to the Olympics, but they did very well just like in the circuit nationally when
Right.
they were a little bit younger. And I was like, put that on there. That
Absolutely.
is such a cool thing. And I'm like, that's the
Yeah.
thing they'll remember about
Yeah.
you. And especially, this is like really true, I think, of athletes, which is what that person fit into. You know, being an athlete and talking about that experience, you know, there's a level of dedication, teamwork, like there's so
Yeah.
much skill building that happens with that. So if
Oh
you
yeah.
have that, really adding some of that in, because I've had athletes that don't want to talk about, they don't put that on their resume because they're like, well, it's
Right.
not professional. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's
No,
still skill building.
I think that's such an important piece. I know sales in tech, like for entry level BDR, SDR positions, they love college athletes. Like they recruit from college athletes and they, go to colleges and specifically ask, can we speak to the women's lacrosse team? Because they know these people are driven, they know they're accomplished, they know that they're, creative and everything. So put things that you wouldn't think that are your accomplishments, whether personal or professional.
Oh my gosh, yes. Could not have said that better. And I'll tell you, it's been probably well, it's been longer since I've worked in undergrad, but
Yeah.
when I worked in undergrad it was at least 5 or 6 years ago, and that was true then, and it's still true
So much.
now.
Yeah.
You know, so really take heed on that. You know, there are certain types of positions that lend themselves to experiences that you've had in college. Even if it's just
Right.
something you do right out of the gate, you can
Right.
gain some really good professional experience and then go and do something else.
Right. Absolutely.
Awesome. Any other resume tips you wanted to add? We went off a little bit there.
Um, no, I think that those tips are kind of my bread and butter when it comes to resume or what I would tell friends applying to tech jobs.
Great. Awesome. Okay, now let's go to interview.
Oh
What are
yeah.
some of your interviewing tips for people?
This is interesting. For students, for interviewing for anyone, you're nervous. It's natural. It's a weird human interaction we all do. It's impossible to go into an interview feeling so 100% confident, like you're going to feel nervous. You have someone in front of you that you know is judging everything you say. And so it's just difficult. But I think my tip for going in less nervous and more confident is talking to someone right before. I think don't isolate, get used to talking to someone, practice. Another tip that I have is interviewing is just basically sharing anecdotes with your interviewer. So if you can think of 5 different small anecdotes that you have about your life or how you've dealt with failure, how you've dealt with a difficult person, you can pretty much tailor them to all of those different behavioral questions someone will ask you. And I'm not saying exaggerate or lie. I'm just saying that you can, basically form your stories to kind of fit. And so I think those 2 things are the biggest help. And I'll share one kind of funny story. Before I interview, I always like jam out right before I go in. Like I'm always like listening to music, like kind of zoning out. And so that kind of gets me most calm before I walk in.
I love that advice. Like jamming out, having a conversation with somebody right before you go in. I
Yeah.
feel like that is not advice you hear very often. People usually say like, "Oh, go to like a quiet space, and
Yeah.
breathe," which is great. For some people, that's actually great and that's what you're going to
Right.
need. But
Right.
for other people, you're right. Getting the energy out, like that nervous energy that you
Yeah.
have. Oh my gosh, I love that. And having the 5 examples prepared, that's, oh my gosh, I used to tell students that all the time. I'm like, don't
Right.
prepare an answer for every single question because you don't know what they're
Right.
going to ask. Just
Right.
have your own examples ready, your own stories ready, and you'll be able to adapt it. So I
Yeah.
love that advice. So in line with what us as career coaches talk about. So I
Yeah.
think that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, for sure. And I mean, my personal opinion, I think interviewing today is easier than it was 2 years ago when you had to go in person. If you're interviewing remote, at least you can kind of fidget your hands below your desk or below the Zoom or whatever you need to do. Like, there is nothing quite terrifying walking into an office in your suit or, whatever your blouse and just being so visible and
Right.
doing that for 3 or 4 hours straight as new people come in and interview you. So
Well, and the before and after, right? You have to drive there. You have to make sure you know where
yes,
you're going. Like all of the prep
to be
for
there on time. Yes, totally. Oh my gosh.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think the online space that we're in right now has just made it so much easier for people. For
Yeah.
some people not. I think some people really thrive on that, in-person
Right.
interaction, but
Right.
for people who tend to get a little bit more nervous, then just
Yeah.
not having to drive, I think, just takes out a layer of
It
stress.
does. Or take the bus and then oh my gosh. Yeah. I had an interview once and I was running in and I spilled coffee everywhere 5 minutes before I met the person and I had just had to sit in like drenched clothes and coffee. They probably felt so bad for me.
Oh my gosh. You know what though? Those experiences to me, if that ever happens to anybody who's listening, one of those just unfortunate things, roll with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely roll with it because
Yeah.
that will show like your ability to just deal with
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
whatever's in front of you. And honestly, that will be more impressive to
Yeah.
somebody than trying to like hide everything, and act like it didn't happen. Like just own
Totally.
it and go for it.
Totally. Yes, exactly. The more like confident you can be and just like this happened, but I'm gonna make it work. I think that's a great quality.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Cover letters.
Yeah.
Do we care about them? Do you guys accept them? What's the verdict at Cloudflare?
So my golden rule with cover letters is that they can only hurt you. If I think for jobs that require cover letters, get in there, spend the extra time to tailor it, do it well. I mean that they can only hurt you if you mess them up. So like I cannot even tell you the amount of people or times I've seen cover letters for jobs at Cloudflare that say, it's my dream to work at Facebook. It's my dream to work at Google. And it's because people don't take the time to look at the details and realize, oh my gosh, this cover letter is not for my Facebook interview. It's for my Cloudflare one. And so that's what I'm saying. They can only hurt you. I don't think a cover letter is necessarily going to change anything. I think it's kind of an age-old thing that people still require. We barely require cover letters anymore. So that's why I'm saying they can really only hurt you if we see that.
Okay. Do you feel like for people who maybe are trying to make a transition, so
Yeah.
maybe their experience doesn't 100% match what you're looking for, but they have some of the transferable skills, do you think a
Yeah.
cover letter helps your hiring managers at that point? Or is it like, we're still going to really look at the resume anyway?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I think so. Absolutely. Like if you have kind of a non-traditional background for the role that you're applying for, or just kind of a set of experience that wouldn't make sense for majority of the candidates, I think that's like a great time to get in there and be like, give me a chance because these are my transferable skills. This is where my passion lies. I'm looking to make an industry change. Um, or even we have a program called Path Forward. It's for mothers who've been out of work for a long time, or I should say, sorry, caregivers. So mothers or fathers who've taken time off raising family for 10 years and then they're coming back to the workforce. And I think cover letters are so great for them because they get to explain, I'm looking to get back into this industry or make this change. And I think it's really helpful.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Oh, I'm just
Yeah.
totally fangirling over your company right now. This is like
Oh,
so
Cloudflare is the best.
This is gonna have to go on my list of companies that I recommend to clients
Yes.
because, oh my gosh, this is so great. I love it when organizations can think forward in that way and not discriminate against people who have a gap or who
Yeah.
had other family obligations and life obligations. So I think that's so
Yeah.
wonderful.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I think our whole culture was really, our head of people is a mother, and she is just such a strong proponent for working mothers and fathers and building your life around, or sorry, your work life around your life. It's not cutting corners to like missing your daughter's recital because you have to attend this meeting or you have to stay late. It's really kind of how can I do my best work but still live my life and be a good mother?
Oh, so great. Oh, I love hearing that. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. That is,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's amazing. So, what do you think job seekers should be doing, but
Yeah.
they aren't doing?
Oh gosh, what do I think they should be doing? Well, I can say for right now, things are moving so quickly. And with that, we're getting, a lot of, I want to say like kind of almost there's just a lack of respect for people's time. And so we'll get so many like last minute cancellation on interviews or just no shows on interviews. And I think before when the market was like less conducive for hiring, we never would get those. People really take that as like, wow, I'm getting this opportunity, and showing up, or if something happens, making sure to let us know in advance. But when you're getting like 5 interviews and you end up getting a job that you want, just still taking the time to let the other companies know. So just kind of maybe I would say bringing that respect back to job seeking, I think goes a long way because those people will probably be looking for jobs again. And we remember, you remember candidates that were respectful and you remember candidates that were not respectful. So that's what I think job seekers should keep in mind.
Okay. Now, I have a follow up to that
Yeah.
because this is something that I hear on the candidate side more.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like recruiters who are also ghosting candidates?
Yeah.
Because we're seeing a lot of that as well. And I don't know, is that something that you've had experience with, or do you guys have like processes in place that inform
Yeah.
candidates if they don't go to the next step?
Yeah. So I will say it's definitely not intentional. There's no policy that's like, okay, if they don't do well, just never talk to them again. It is mostly a function of having a small recruiting team with just so much overdrive and so many things going on. Where the point is, there's just probably a crack in the function. There's something, a missing piece of like that communication. Um, so I would suggest following up always. If you don't hear back in a week, 2 weeks, always follow up, and giving people the benefit of the doubt, because sometimes you never know if people on the team are out of office, they haven't been able to sync. That can happen often. But I would just say that companies do have policies. We have kind of like, if they've been on site or face to face, it's important to get back to them within a business week. And if they have a phone interview or whatnot, that's 2 weeks.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I so appreciate you sharing that, because I think that people forget that there are people on the other end
Right. Right.
of this entire process. So even though there's an ATS system, there is a person, multiple people in that system daily
Right.
going through things. You guys are in interviews. So sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day to even
Totally.
follow up with everyone. And so I think, having grace on both sides is so important, and remembering that they're people. Like, you
Right.
guys are
Right.
still people as recruiters.
Exactly. Right. We're not this like mean, bad function that's looking to insult you, or take your time and then never talk to you again. It's not like that at all. So I'd encourage following up. And usually that warrants a response.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Any last thoughts or tips that you have from your experience as a recruiter that you feel like people need to know?
I need to know. I think before you even start interviewing and applying to companies, I think it's so important just to take some time to really think about what your skills are. And especially I tell this to students because it's so fair as a student and you're looking for a first time job, you can still be incredibly lost, even though you may know what your major is, know that you liked or disliked your major. There's still so many jobs that fit skills and interests outside of your major, and that you can shift at any time in your career. So instead of just sitting there and throwing your resume out to 20 different jobs in 5 different industries, I really think it's important. And I wish I had taken my own advice back in the day to take a week and say, I'm going to go on a walk every single day this week. And during that hour, I'm going to think about, what am I good at? What have people told me that I'm good at or given me positive feedback around? And then kind of that's your starting point.
Awesome. Okay, I have to make a plug for my career services professionals
Yeah.
on university campuses. If you are a student right now, whether that's undergrad or graduate level, you have career staff at your
Totally.
school that this is what they do.
Use
They help
them.
you figure out your skills, they help you sort through the right types of positions for you. They can talk you through this, they can edit resumes for you, they can go through the interview process with you and practice. Some of them even record it, and especially now that I'm sure a lot is done online,
Right.
you're getting it recorded. I know that not every career services person is built the same.
Right.
So if you don't have a great experience with somebody that you go see somebody else. It's
Yeah.
likely more than one person.
Yeah.
But absolutely take advantage of that, because that is a resource on your campus that is there for you, that you are paying for with your tuition.
Yeah.
And also, they likely have a job board where these types of positions that Ellie recruits for are going to be on there. Internships, new grad, all of that is going to go on that online job board.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen like a non-online one in a very long time.
Yeah.
So definitely take advantage of that. And then even for those who are at the professional level, depending on the institution you went to, you can actually
Mhm.
go back and utilize your career office
Oh
as an
yeah.
alumni. And so that's
Okay.
also a really great opportunity for you to get some free, in some cases, career coaching and career advice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My school still sends out alumni job board. So all of the alumni, we post on it and they send it out, and it's incredible. So if you're looking for a job, plug into those things. They're so helpful.
Yes, yes, amazing. Okay, Ellie, if people want to get in contact with you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you can find me on LinkedIn, spelt the same way, probably listed here.
Yes, I'll
Um,
I'll put it in the show notes for this episode.
yes, so send me a LinkedIn message. I try to get back to you as many as possible. Friend me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Amazing. Ellie, thank you so much for taking your time, which I know is precious, the way
Oh,
everything is working right now, to speak to my audience and give us all of these amazing tips. I really appreciate it.
yes, absolutely. Good luck, everyone. Julia, thank you so much. I am such a fan, and I think that you're doing really great work, and I know helping so many of the listeners. So, everybody, good luck and apply to Cloudflare. I can't wait to hear and see any of your applications. So, would love to see that.
Thank you.